It's time for another Dice Tower review from Gamers Remorse.
Hello and welcome back to Gamers Remorse. Today we're checking out the new game by Mayfair called Villainy, where you bring out your inner villain inside and try and take down Fantastiman.
Villainy is a 2 to 4 player game from Mayfair Games. In Villainy, players take on the role of an aspiring supervillain attempting to cause havoc and eventually defeat Fantastiman, the city's hero. Each player starts the game with one control panel, a villain, 4 on and off tokens, a fight marker, 4 colored cubes, and a cube of power, more commonly known as a D6. Each player is dealt a starting mission from the Origin plan deck, establishing their starting goals. Play begins with the player setting out the Meanwhile cards by drawing the top 5 cards from the deck and placing them face up in front of the players. They then do the same with the Henchman for Hire deck. The Free-for-All deck and the Help Wanted markers are then placed beside the other decks. If at any point there are 4 Do Some Crime or 4 Alter Ego cards face up in the Meanwhile deck, the villains go to battle. A free-for-all card is drawn and the results carried out. Alternatively, during a player's turn, they can move the Help Wanted token 1 card down. If the token ever hits the last card, a free-for-all card is drawn and Meanwhile and Help decks are redealt. Place the fight cards in view of all players so they may see what the results of the fights are. Note, there are various outcomes based on how many players are playing and thus set out the correct card for the number of players you have at your table. You are now ready to play the game. On each turn, you can have one of your ready characters do something. You have 3 options: take an action, work your team and make money, or complete an evil plan. If you choose to take an action, you have 6 choices. If you qualify for an alter ego, you can take it and thus make more money when you work. If you have the money, you can hire a henchman. You can do some crimes to improve your team, or if your character has a hot action, they can do that action. You can start a fight in which each player rolls their die. Consult the fight card to see how the fight resolves. By a specialty, each attribute has 2 specialties, which cost the value of that stat. So if your character has a strength of 5, it costs 5 coins to get a weapon or a gadget for that character. If all your characters are off, you have to work your team. Flip them all onto on and then collect coins equal to your villain's alter ego's salary, or 1 if he has no alter ego. If you choose to work while some of your henchmen are still ready, and they have an alter ego, you collect their salary as well. If you have the needed stats for your mission, you can complete the evil plan. To do so, every character fulfilling a role in the plan must be on ready. You will then declare their part and assign them appropriately. Once completing the plan, you will draw a new plan from the Villainous Act deck. If you complete a Villainous Act, then you will draw a Magnum Opus card. To complete your Magnum Opus, you must have your full team work together before facing off against Fantastiman. To beat Fantastiman, you must roll 8 or higher on your Cube of Power. To do so takes the aid of Notoriety, which is done by surviving Fantastiman cards. If after completing the task on the Fantastiman card, you still qualify for your Magnum Opus, you can either roll or draw again. Once you roll, however, the results are final. You win or you lose. If you roll an 8, you win and claim the title of Super Villain. But if you don't roll an 8 or greater, you are beaten by Fantastiman and must remuster your strength before trying again.
Now we're going to review Villainy by Mayfair Games. Let's start off with Brian. What do you think?
For those of you unaware, which probably means all of you, I love comics. And one of the things I love about comics is the villains, because they're fun. But you'd never get to be the villain until now. So that was awesome. So let's jump into my rubric. The visuals on this game I thought were fantastic because they're very kind of like the transition out of the golden age of comics to a degree. So I really enjoyed that. I liked looking at all of the villains. I almost said heroes. All the villains and the henchmen. I just thought that was really cool. And so I gave it 1.75 out of 2. The downside was there were a lot of little chits that were hard to always keep track of, and they were very basic. It would have been cool to see some iconography as opposed to letters. Unlike everyone else that I've talked to about this game, I really enjoyed the rulebook. I thought that really fed the theme. The box, as we were discussing earlier today, is just fantastic. The box looks like it would be the cover of an old comic. So I thought that was fantastic. Skill luck balance, I give that 0.75 out of 1. I thought that was balanced fairly well. There's a lot of room for skill and planning and who do I want to work in which areas on my team. But then there's a lot of luck when it would come down to very specific elements. What cards are drawn for Meanwhile? What die do you roll in a fight? But those are all options that you pick hopefully strategically. Pacing 0 to 2, I gave that a 1.25. There is a lot of room in this game for analysis paralysis, which I would argue is probably its biggest downfall. I have a few friends that I would not play this game with for that alone. There are plenty of options for you to choose from, and if you're playing strategically, you want to analyze every single option. Theme and immersion 0 to 2, I gave that a 1.75, and part of that comes into the art, part of that comes into the rulebook, a lot of that comes through the art and everything, but just this idea of being a villain and doing things like putting cats in trees, or making roses that don't smell good, or whatever it may be that your villain is doing. I found that really enjoyable, and I enjoyed seeing some of that flavor come through the cards. And some would argue it's unnecessary. I would argue it's fun. It adds to the fun. And then the mechanics, 0 to 1, I give that a 0.75. I really enjoyed the way the mechanics interacted with one another. There are things I would have enjoyed more. I didn't like a lot of the card drawing because there's a lot of luck in that. But again, there's skill in how it was drawn and what you picked out of that. But I enjoyed the different options you had. I enjoyed the fighting. Based on where you put your henchmen, they would have different abilities. That was really clever. And then was it fun? 0 to 2, I gave that a 1.75. I enjoyed a vast majority of the game. It's one of those games, though, where you get out of it what you put into it. And so you would probably want to play it with other people who are equally engaged. So I think that's something to monitor when picking this game is, would everyone I'm playing with be engaged in the game or not? So all in all, I give the game an 8. It's definitely down my alley. I'm a huge Ameritrash gamer, and as Sean was telling us when he was looking at this game, it's Ameritrash in a box. It's pure theme. It runs entirely on the theme. If you don't buy into the theme, you probably won't enjoy the game. But Sean, what were your thoughts?
Brian loves Ameritrash games. I'm kind of on the fence about them. I steer more towards Euro style for their simplicity and sleekness. This game is not that, but that's not entirely a bad thing, right? I think Mayfair set out to make a great Ameritrash game, and I think they did it. But I don't know if it's the game for me. Let's hit my rubric. Quality of components, 0 to 2. I gave it 1.5. The reason for that is the artwork was great. I mean, it's Mayfair, so it's gonna be good. The rulebook was okay. There were some legibility issues in regards to the flow of the layout. They tried to make it very comic book-like, and the theme came off across in that. However, it made reading it a little bit difficult. We eventually figured it out. Also, there is a control panel, if you will, at the bottom that have these little twisty pieces. And so what can happen is if someone bumps the table, all 4 of you just lost all 4 of your henchmen twisty pieces. So now you have to remember, all right, well, that was a 4, I think, and that was a 5. And then multiply that times 12 times 4 people. You can see the problem. Good balance of skill deluxe, 0 to 1. I gave it a 0.5. It seemed like a lot of what I was doing was making micro decisions to eventually get to your magnum opus, right? To then beat up Fantastaman. But unfortunately, sometimes the cards just weren't being drawn for me. It was really whatever Eric left for me to pick up, and it was usually nothing. And then I would have the misfortune of drawing a card and playing it, but I couldn't actually use that card yet. Then Brian would pick it up, and then it just boosted him, Brian, but not me. It just seemed like sometimes luck was on your side or not. Downtime 0 to 1, I gave it a 0.5. Brian said there's some room for analysis paralysis. That's absolutely true, but if it's players that know what they're trying to do, I think you can get around that pretty quickly. Theme 0 to 2, I gave it 1.5. The theme is throughout. Right? I didn't find a single thing that it wasn't there. I mean, even the box art, it looks like a comic book, so that was cool to see. Thrill competitive 0 to 2. I gave it a 1 just because there were so many pieces that it was difficult for me to get that aspect of raw thrill because I was too busy worried about my intelligence of my CEO / wrestler character. You know what I mean? Like, it just seemed like there was enough complexity there that I was missing some thrill because I was overthinking things. And then was it fun? 1 to 2. I gave it a 1. I liked it, but I don't know if it's my favorite game. It seemed like there were some drawbacks between waiting for my turn to come around. There wasn't enough to do in that time. There was a lot going on in the game at any one time. So overall, I gave it a 6. That's a decent score. I guess that's my thoughts on it. I didn't like it as much as Brian, but again, Brian loves Ameritrash style games. And this is a solid 90-minute game. What do you think, Eric?
I really liked the look of it. I love the sound of it. The artwork, like they were saying, is fantastic. Once we got into the game, I felt like there was a lot of components that just weren't necessary at all. And it was just a mess of things in front of me that it was just, I have to keep track of these things that don't need to be used, and it was a little frustrating. Yeah, so the appeal, I give a 4. It looked really good. The sound of it was something I really wanted to get into. However, I just could not enjoy it as much as these guys. I really, it's definitely not my kind of a game. I gave that a 1. On the off chance of being asked to play it, there's like a 1 in 100 chance that I'll say yes. But
So you're saying there's a chance.
which means Brian's gonna ask me 100 times.
A day.
I mean,
So that brings my score to a 5.
all right. So 5, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate?
Villainy with a 6.3.
6.3 repeating, which if you round up, that's 6.3. Because it didn't make
Because it wasn't 635.
So that has been Villainy on Gamers Remorse with a score of 6.3.
8. Score of 8. Their scores don't count.
Right. If you're a Ameritrash lover, 8.
Or a villain.
Or a
Or
villain.
a villainous.
Because they're
American.
synonymous.
Yes. All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.